In this sequence of videos, we're going to talk about Quine's paper, Two Dogmas of Empiricism. This is a really significant paper in the history of analytic philosophy. It was very, very influential. And part of what I want you to understand is the arguments in the paper, but part of what I want you to understand is why the paper was so influential. And to that end, we're going to start out by recapping Frege and Carnap's views on analyticity. Now, to be clear, Frege wasn't using the word analytic. Some people might contest the claim that he was thinking of, he was thinking in terms of analyticity, or that what he was thinking of can be reframed as a discussion of analyticity. But we're going to set the kind of exegetical issues aside and say the spirit of Frege's view fits with the idea that analyticity is central to philosophical theorizing, and the spirit of Carnap's view does the same. So why is that? Well, let's recall Frege's view on names, the meaning of names. You have a sentence like, "That's Mark Twain," and you can analyze that sentence into another, like, "That's the author of Huckleberry Finn." And the idea is that "That's Mark Twain" can analyze into "That's the author of Huckleberry Finn" because the sense of Mark Twain is understood by any competent user of the term, and the sense is something like, or at least a sense of Mark Twain is something like the author of Huckleberry Finn. So the transformation from "That's Mark Twain" to "That's the author of Huckleberry Finn" is an analytic transformation. Put another way, the following sentence is analytic. If a person is Mark Twain, then that person is the author of Huckleberry Finn. And if a person is the author of Huckleberry Finn, then that person is Mark Twain. So that sentence would be analytic. Why? Because the sense of Mark Twain includes something like being the author of Huckleberry Finn. Now, we can continue this transformation by analyzing author, and we might say that's the person who wrote Huckleberry Finn. Why do we say that? Because to be the author of a book is to be the person who wrote the book. And the idea is the transformation from author to person who wrote is based on your understanding of the sense of, based on your understanding of author, which requires grasping the sense of author. And the sense of author is something like person who wrote. Now we could continue on down. We could now replace Huckleberry Finn, the book title, with something like, "That's the person who wrote the book about Tom Sawyer's friend." So that's the author of the book about Tom Sawyer's friend. So Huckleberry Finn, that name gets replaced with the book about Tom Sawyer's friend. And then we could further analyze this by getting rid of Tom Sawyer, by describing him as the person who, tricked everybody into painting the fence for whitewashing the fence, and so on and so forth. The idea is you keep on analyzing down until you get into some basic vocabulary. And all of this analysis, all of these transformations from one sense to another are based on the senses of the expressions of the previous sentence. And consequently, the transformation from any one to another produces an analyticity. And we can sort of, because analyticity will be transitive, we can say the sentence "That's Mark Twain" is true if and only if the sentence "That's the author of the book about Tom Sawyer's friend" is true. And that sentence will be analytic. Okay. And again, you keep going until you get to a basic vocabulary. What is a basic vocabulary? We're going to leave that unspecified for now. I just want you to see that analyticity is, it's sort of a fallout of Frege's view on the meaning of both proper names and kind terms like author. Now, come over here. The move from one of these to another is based on your understanding of the sense of the previous expression. And being a competent user of a non-basic expression requires being able to identify its sense. So being a competent user of a non-basic expression requires being able to identify these transformations, which means anyone who understands them can see that they're true based on their grasp of the meaning of the expression. So all of these transformations are analytic. Now let's look at Carnap. Remember Carnap's sentence, "That's an anthropode." That means, according to Carnap, that's an animal with a jointed body and segmented legs. So Carnap thinks that this transformation from "that's an anthropod" to "that's an animal with a jointed body and segmented legs" is analytic. He thinks anyone who understands the meaning of this can perform the analysis, producing this. Or maybe I should not put it in epistemic terms. I'll just put it in metaphysical terms. He thinks the truth conditions for this sentence, give the meaning of this sentence, and he thinks the truth conditions for this sentence just are the meaning, the truth conditions of this sentence. So they have the same truth conditions. So they mean the same thing. So the connection between them is analytic. That is, that's an anthropod is true if and only if that's an animal with jointed body and segmented legs is true, and any competent user of the expression anthropod can see that one leads to the other. Now we can continue our analysis and analyze animal into multicellular organism that ingests food. So we can say that's a multicellular organism that ingests food with a jointed body and segmented legs, and we can just continue on down. And Carnap does provide an answer to what makes vocabulary basic. He thinks it's basic if it refers directly to something that's in perception, something that's in sense experience. So you keep going until you get to the protocol language, which consists of entirely of terms that either refer directly to perceptual experience, maybe like is red, is 2 feet long, and so on, or they're part of the logical vocabulary. So and, or, if, equals, these might not be referring to items of experience itself, but they're part of what Carnap calls the logical vocabulary. They get kind of special status. He thinks that's because they don't actually refer. They're just sort of rules for using language or something like this. Okay. Well, for Carnap, the meaning of an expression is its verification condition. These statements all have the same verification condition. That is, these three have the same verification condition, as does anything else that you get to by analyzing the constituent expressions of one of these. So they all have the same meaning. So once again, these transformations are analyticities. Go from any one of them to any other, and or say, that's an anthropode if and only if that's a multicellular organism that ingests food with a jointed body and segmented legs. That sentence is going to be analytic. Okay, so the point here is that although Frege and Carnap disagree about a lot, Frege is a rationalist, Carnap is an empiricist. Frege thinks of can be used to inspire the view that we can have substantive a priori knowledge. Carnap doesn't think we can have substantive a priori knowledge. They do agree about something. Both think analyticity is commonplace, and they think it's central to doing philosophy. So both think statements analyze into more basic statements until you reach some sort of basic vocabulary. Well, that's a lot of common ground, despite their sort of deep differences. One way to think about it is they would, in effect, prescribe a lot of the same methods for doing philosophy. It's just that they think they'd be up to different things. Frege would say you're learning about the nature of reality when you deploy this method, when you investigate analyticities. And Carnap would say you're learning something about your language when you're doing philosophy in this way, when you're identifying analyticities. Consequently, Quine's attack on analyticity is a serious challenge to a kind of Frege-Carnap consensus, a kind of consensus that runs through both despite their deep differences. And it's not a minor consensus, it's a consensus on how we should go about doing philosophy. So it's a really significant point of agreement that Quine is going to attack. Okay, we'll stop this video there and continue next time with Quine's attack.